without further ado, welcome to the first session of 2025 Founder Fundamentals, and we're going to start with the Innovator's Guide to Problem Solving. Today's session is led by Leo Chan, the Chief Innovator Igniter at Abound Innovation, who has 20 years of experience, multiple US patents, and a passion for empowering leaders and professionals. Leo believes that everyone can be an innovator, and through creative approaches, including his expertise as a Lego serious play facilitator, Leo helps organizations unleash their innovative potential. And in this workshop, Leo will guide you through strategies to tackle challenges creatively and effectively. And let's give him a warm welcome. I'm also just going to stop sharing my screen. There you go. And over to you.
Hey everyone, good to meet you all. I am also from Markham, so hello from Markham. So I'm probably not so far from some of you, but I am very excited to share this from you. I'm actually a York alum, so if you are from York, I'm also many moons ago was from York too. Alrighty, so you're not here to hear about me. You're here to talk about the Innovator's Guidebook to Problem Solving. So we're going to dive in right now. I'm going to tell you a quick story. This is a true story. So there were two employees who had an idea for over 20 years at a national bank in the United States. And this idea sat dormant for 20 years until my friend, who was a VP of innovation, he came along and he created a event called a hackathon. Now, if you're not familiar with a hackathon, basically what it means is you get to basically work on stuff, and if it gets selected, it actually goes to market. So guess what happens? This idea from these two employees actually got selected, and it went to launch. In its first week of launch, their idea reached tens of thousands of customers. Tens of thousands of customers. This is amazing, right? It is. But it's also sad too, and I'll tell you why it's sad, because what would the impact to this business have been if that idea had been implemented 20 years prior, right? And why, oh why, did this idea just sit there for 20 years? 20 years. Can you imagine the impact it would have had? Probably millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions of customers would have been impacted if it had been implemented sooner. Change happened when the new VP of innovation came along and empowered those employees to innovate. Now, he didn't give them the idea. They had that 20 years ago. But what he did do for them was empower them with a platform to actually innovate. I believe stories like this exist in every organization. Everyone could be an innovator, but not everyone is. People want to innovate, but don't know how. So imagine if, and I know some of you are individual or entrepreneurs, but some of you may also work for companies. But I want you to imagine this, even if you're new at a company, imagine if your business scaled and you were a large business. Imagine if your organization was flowing with an abundance of new ideas. Imagine if every part of your business was transformed by the power of innovation. And imagine if your organization was full of innovators. I believe all of this is possible. So here's the journey we're going to take on today. We're going to talk about what innovation is. I'm going to talk about why it's needed. We're going to talk about what innovators do. We're going to talk about who can innovate. I'm going to give you everyday examples of everyday innovation. And then the how you get started is the nuts and bolts, the practical stuff, where I'm going to teach you some strategies in terms of how you can apply this in your business. So let's get started. Let's talk about what is innovation. But before I talk about that, I want to talk to you about what it isn't. So a lot of times I hear this phrase, which is, I'm not an innovator. And the reason why people say this is because people have a very specific definition of what innovation is, and if it doesn't match that, then they'll say this phrase. And I want to tell you a quick story. I met this woman who was a director in a startup company, and I was getting to know her, and she said, prior to my role here, I used to work for Nestle. And I was like, well, that's cool. And she said, well, in fact, one of the products that I designed still sells on the retail shelves today. In other words, it outlives my career. And then she's like, oh, but I'm not an innovator. And I was like, what? What do you mean you're not an innovator? I'm like, you created a product that outlived your career for Nestle that's still on the retail shelves today. I'm like, you, my friend, are an innovator. And she was like, what? Like, I can't believe it. And I'm like, what do you mean? How do you not believe this? And so that's the reason people have this definition of innovation, but it may not quite be the right one. And have you ever heard this phrase, or have you ever said this phrase, I'm not creative? Maybe you said this. Maybe you know someone that say this. The reason why people say I'm not creative is because we tend to think of creativity as the fine arts, so like music or dance or writing or painting or design, things like that that are in those fine arts. And so if we don't do those things, therefore I am not creative. But guess what? Creative and creativity is much broader than that, which we'll dive into. So I hear this a lot. And then the other thing I want to tell you first is that innovation is not technology. This is probably one of the biggest misconceptions about what innovation is. So if you're not a technology person or you don't use technology, or if you're not in technology, that is okay, because they're different words, by the way. But technology is technology. Technology can enable innovation, but it is not innovation. Also, innovation is not what I call big I innovation. And big I innovation is probably what you would typically think of when you think innovation. Big disruptive things like taxi and ride sharing, or Blockbuster and Netflix. These humongous disruptive things that change industries and change it on head. AI, generative AI, that kind of stuff, right? If we think about innovation in that way, then, well, actually, guess what? I've never innovated myself. And then third, we tend to think as innovation is just for the few. So, unless you're like a Steve Jobs or a Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or sending someone to Mars or something like that, like it's these special people with this special innovative DNA that only certain people have it. And that's actually not the case either. So what is it? Well, first of all, innovation is for everyone. And I hope after this presentation that you, and because you're entrepreneurs, will feel like, hey, I can do this. This is actually what I've been doing. All right. So innovation is for everybody. Second is that innovation is everywhere. And when we reclaim what innovation is, you'll see it more and more in your day-to-day life. And I'm going to share with you 3 examples later. And then finally, innovation is learnable. So innovation is a teachable, learnable mindset and skill set that anyone can learn. And just like you know how to read because you were taught how to read, innovation is the same thing. So I'm here today to teach you, okay? We can't teach you everything, but I'm going to teach you a lot about what this innovation is. So let's define it. Lisa, I do not share my deck, but I think there's recordings, so you could kind of look at it that way. So I would say take some notes if it's helpful for you as well. All right, but I will not actually share this, but you have a recording, so it's kind of like the same thing. Okay, so let's define it. So what is innovation? It's creating a new future by transforming ideas into value. Innovation is creating a new future by transforming ideas into value. Does this definition surprise you? It might, because this is a very broad and holistic way of looking at innovation, right? And so I want to break this down for you in a little bit more detail so you can understand what I'm talking about. So I like to say that it's about creating a new future. And I like to say that the future is happening whether you like it or not, right? So tomorrow is coming, and whether you like tomorrow or you don't like tomorrow, it's a coming. So why not take the agency over that future and make it to be what you want? And you're entrepreneurs, right? You are doing this. You are changing, disrupting the current state to make a better thing for tomorrow because you see a different way. And so that's what you're doing. You're creating a new future. And this is a very empowering message because any of us can do this. We don't have to agree with tomorrow. We can change it by what we do today. So that's what that word new is. And then let's look at that word ideas. This is where creativity sneaks into the conversation. So creativity is the ability to generate ideas. Creativity is the ability to generate ideas. So if you've ever had a new idea or had an idea, you are expressing creativity. So now we don't have to worry about it's not just for the fine artist, right? This is you. If you've come up with ideas, and in fact, you need ideas in order to innovate, this is where creativity sneaks in. Now let's look at the word transforming. So we have to do something with the ideas that we have. We can't just have ideas. If we just have ideas, it's not innovation because we haven't done anything with it. So we take the ideas and we put it through the process, which is an innovation process. We put it through the process, and out of that we can extract value. And value here is just something meaningful. A lot of times we can think about value as money, but it doesn't necessarily need to be that. Innovation doesn't necessarily have to make you money. It can make something better. It can improve quality of life for someone, right? So as long as there's some sort of value that's extracted from that idea, then that's innovation. So another way to look at this is this. Creativity is the front of innovation. You cannot have innovation without creativity. So creativity is generating that idea, you put it through that innovation process, and out of that, you get value. So that is innovation, creating a new future by transforming ideas into value. All right, so let's talk about why innovation is needed. And there's a lot of reasons, but I'm only going to give you two today. Probably the two that I think are the most important. The first is this: it helps you de risk the unknown. So whenever you start the innovation journey, whenever you're starting any kind of project, you start with the highest amount of risk because you don't know what you don't know, right? Let's say a boss comes to you and says, "Hey, Leo, I want you to go work on this." You don't know what you don't know, right? Your risk is highest, and what you're hoping for is when you get to implementation, that risk profile is at the lowest, right? Nobody wants to implement something with lots of risk; it just wouldn't make a lot of sense. So you're hoping that it goes down. But conversely, when you start off a project, your investment in that is very low, right? So you haven't spent a lot of money, time, resources into that thing. But as you go through the process, when you get to implementation, you would have spent a lot of time and money, right? And so what you're trying to do is to kind of maximize your finances and lower the risk. So by the time it gets to implementation, when your investment's the highest, you're hoping that your risk is the lowest, right? That makes sense to us. And that's what innovation and the innovation process helps us do. It helps us give you also confidence to move through this journey that's unknown to you. And so it gives you that confidence that you can implement something with the lowest amount of risk possible. It's never going to be none, but as low as possible. The second reason is this: why we need innovation. It's no one is safe from disruption. So I don't know if you know this, but over 52% of Fortune 500 companies from the year 2000 are extinct, gone, just not here. All right, over half. That's staggering, right? If you think about these great brands from 25 years ago now, they're completely non-existent. And 50 years ago, the average life cycle of a Fortune 500 brand was 61 years, and now it's less than 18. That's staggering if you think about it, right? Fortune 500 brands are the biggest companies in the world, and they used to be 61 years for on average, and now it's less than 18, which is dropped by 67%. That's staggering, right? So no one's safe from disruption. And I'm sure you remember this brand, right? Kodak. You know, they were at one point the world's biggest film company. From 1889 to 2012 was when they were around, but they couldn't keep up with the digital revolution. And I wonder if you know who created the first digital camera. It was Kodak. Kodak created the first digital.
This meeting is being recorded.
Kodak Kodak was the first company to develop the digital camera, but they were afraid that it would cannibalize their sales. So they actually did nothing with the tech that they developed. And guess what happened? They got disrupted by it, right? Because digital cameras became a thing, and then film, I mean, it's kind of still around, but it's really not how it was in today. And so they filed for bankruptcy in 2012. Really sad story because they actually had the tech that disrupted them. They invented it first. The second one are taxis. You remember these? Have you ever used one? Do you still use them? So in 2014, the right to own a taxi cab in New York City, which was called a taxi medallion, was worth over $1 million. $1 million. Okay, so to the right to own a taxi in New York City, it would run you about $1 million. And here was the ground transportation market at the time. So ride hailing was 8%, rental cars 55%, and taxis 37%. Look what happens in 4 years. The valuation had dropped to $170,000 in just 4 years. That's an 82% drop in valuation, which is nuts, right? It's just crazy. And ride hailing became almost 71% of the population, 23.5% to rental cars, and taxis 6%. And then look at in 2021, the lowest valuation for a medallion had dropped to $25,000 7 years later. This is a 98% drop. If you're a taxi medallion owner in New York City, I mean, you're not happy, right? Your investment had dropped by 98%. So what these two stories tell us is that you either disrupt or you be disrupted. You either disrupt or you be disrupted. And the choice is actually up to you. Okay, so that's a choice that you make today, whether you want to lead the disruption or you are disrupted from something or someone else. So, what do innovators do? What do innovators do? They both see and create a new future. right? So they're actually able to see a new possibility for tomorrow. But they don't just see that possibility, they actually have to create it. They actually have to bring that into fruition. It's not just about seeing something. They have to do the hard work of innovation. They have to do the work to bring that into reality. And in other words, they disrupt status quo, or aka the present. So they're saying yes to a new possibility in the future and saying no to today, no to tomorrow. These are the attributes of innovators. So first of all, they are people who are open-minded and love to learn. So these folks are open-minded to all kinds of possibilities, new ideas, all that kind of stuff, and they really love learning. The second thing is that they are very curious. So innovators ask lots of questions. They're always kind of like, oh, I wonder why this is happening. They're really leaned into that curiosity and they follow it. The third thing is that they're experimenters and tinkerers. So they're not afraid to roll their sleeves up and kind of get into it and try and experiment and fail, because they want to. It's better to try than not to try. So they'll get in there and try stuff. Which means that they're willing to take risks. It's all right if it doesn't work. It's okay if there's failures along the way, because you just never know. You have to risk in order to try, right? They also enjoy problem solving. So there are people that always are coming up with all sorts of ideas to, like, oh, hey, this problem. What if we did this? They really enjoy the process of problem solving. They also like to collaborate with others because, and often their dreams are so big that they can't execute it on alone. So they need the support, or they need the expertise of other people. So they love collaborating. They also are very astute noticers. They're really good at observing things. They'll see things that perhaps that we all see, but they're able to kind of take that insight and then do something with it. So really good observers. They also see possibilities. They're visionaries, right? They do see a possible new future for tomorrow, and they're able to then bring that into reality. And then ninth, they are truly people that think differently about things. And finally, they are creative. Now, I've given you 10 things, and I want you to think about you. How about you? How many of these characteristics do you have? And I hope that this actually works. But type in the chat A, B, C, D, or E. How many of these attributes of innovators do you have? I want you to reflect on these right now and then type it in, and we'll see if this works. All right, I'm seeing all, yes. Most. This is great. Look at y'all. Well, I'm not surprised because you're entrepreneurs and you're here at Y-Space for Founder Fundamentals. So absolutely, I love this. This is great. Okay, so this is lovely. I love seeing this. This is fantastic. Okay, I'm going to give you 5 more seconds to answer, and we'll see if the numbers change a little bit, but this is great. All right, so 82% of you say most of them. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I love it. Okay. I was going to say, hey, you know what? You at least have one because you're creative, but I love seeing that. So 82% and above seeing most or all. All right. This means that you have innovative potential. And if you've never thought about this, you do. Okay, you have innovative DNA within you. I am telling you this. I believe it fully with all my heart that you have innovative potential. And now let's talk about who can innovate. Who can innovate? So I want you to answer this right now. Have you ever created a new future? Have you ever created a new future? Type A for yes or B for no. And this doesn't have to be at work. It could be in your personal life. But have you ever created a new future? Let me know in the chat. Well, isn't this lovely? Love it. I'm just going to assume that we're seeing all sorts of A's flooding in. This is lovely. All right. So this is great. I love it. I love it. What this is saying is that you have innovated. So if you've never thought that you've innovated in your life, you have, because you've created a new future. So 100% to all of you, you have innovated. And what I really want you to know is that everyone can be an innovator today. Entrepreneurship and innovation, they're like the same thing to me in my mind. It's really this same application, the same principles. And so you are an innovator, an entrepreneur. You can call yourself both of them if you like after today. Okay. And the way you become an innovator is very simple. You just learn how to do innovation. I call it innovation thinking and innovation doing, both the mindsets and skill sets of innovation. That's all it takes. So you might be like, really, Leo? Well, I don't want you to just take my word for this. I want to introduce you to a friend of mine named Sydney. So when I met Sydney, she was a a young lady, and I was in a innovation workshop with her. And so, she's in this innovation workshop with me, and we're talking. Well, I see her participating, and I noticed about Sydney that she seemed like someone that had innovative potential. I could like smell it from her. So I said to Sydney, I was like, hey, I lead this program where I teach people how to become innovative, and I think you would love it. And so we get talking to about it, and she's like, she gets approval and she joins. And when she joined the program, I'm telling you, she was the most like excited person I had ever met. And I had a lot of people join the program, but she was particularly excited. And she was like, I feel seen. I'm like with my people. I'm no longer a unicorn. I don't feel weird anymore. Like I'm not that weird person that comes with ideas in the middle of the night. And I was like, this is just kind of really amazing to me. So I said, hey, could we just get on one and just kind of talk this out? And she's like, sure. And she's like, so all my life, she drew a Venn diagram. So I'm going to show you this Venn diagram. She's like, I always saw myself as like this. So work's over here and me's over here. And I'm hoping that just sometimes that they would just kind of collide. I just hope that sometimes they'll collide until I met you and until you told me that I was an innovator. And she's like, I finally realized that like I could bring my full self to my work because my innovation self and my work self could finally merge finally one day and they don't have to bump into anymore. And I was just like, yes, yes, it was amazing, right? So this is what happens when you embrace innovation into yourself. When you realize that you can innovate and learn how to do it, there is power. There is power, my friends. And when you align your passions and skills to your work, there's both fulfillment and meaning. And when you know you can innovate, be ready to be amazed because you're going to do things that you never dreamed possible. Your team will see you do things they never thought possible, and your organization will see you do things that they never thought possible. So be ready to be amazed in all stretch and meanings of the words because that is what exactly is going to happen. All right. Okay, so let's dive into 3 examples of everyday innovation. The first is from a company called Van Moof. They are a Dutch e-bike company. Curious if anyone has ever heard of these folks. Type yes in the chat if you have. I'm just curious before I dive in. Dutch e-bike company. Yes, big no. All right. Most people haven't here. I'm saying okay. So they make e-bikes, and in 2016 they decided to start shipping their product to the U.S. Okay, so not a big deal, but there was a big problem for them. Over 25% of their bikes were being damaged on arrival. So when they were shipping it from overseas, when it arrived in the US, over 25% were being damaged by the carriers. And this was a problem because this wasn't even the product shipping to the customer. This is just getting the product from overseas to the United States. So that was a big problem. So the team gets together and they ask each other, like, what do Americans love? What would prompt couriers to be delicate with a parcel? Do you know what the answer to this question was? What do Americans love? What are your guesses? What do Americans love? Putting things together. Canada, yes. Money, convenience, food. What they said was televisions. Americans love televisions. So what was really interesting about this was that their bikes just happened to be about the same weight as televisions. And the box of their bikes happened to be about the same size as televisions. So this is what they did. They printed a picture of a television and they stuck it on the box of their bikes. And this is the result. It reduced the amount of damage by 80%. 80%. Simply by reconfiguring the ink. It's amazing, right? All they did was print a picture of a TV on the box and it reduced that damage by 80%. And this became a thing for Van Moof. The customers loved it, and so they continued on with this. But this simple innovation saved them 80% of their carrier damage. You can imagine how much money that saved them just by reconfiguring ink on a box. Second example, rolling luggage. So before 1970s, there were 2 ways you would move luggage around. You would hire a porter, right? You'd hire someone to move it for you, or you would lift it yourself. And this is just interesting, by the way. Rolling luggage was invented after we put someone on the moon. Like, why? But okay, so we put someone on the moon before we invented rolling luggage. So here's what happened. In 1970, the guy named Bernard Sato, who was the vice president of United States Luggage, he became the inventor of the world's first wheeled luggage bag, which he patented in 1972. So how did he come up with this idea? So in the 70s, he actually was struggling himself. He was carrying two heavy suitcases through an airport after returning home from a family vacation. So he kind of like realized the pain of this himself. And so what happened was he actually got stuck at customs, like we all do. Maybe it's like YYZ, right? We know how long customs are. So he gets stuck at customs. But while he's stuck at customs, he sees a worker who's moving around heavy machinery on a wheeled pallet effortlessly. So he sees this happening before his eyes, and he whispers to his wife this. He says to her, he says, you know, that's what we need for luggage. So the very next day, he goes to his office and he goes to a wardrobe trunk and he removed 4 wheel casters off this wardrobe trunk. And then he gets a bag and he gets a strap and he sticks it all together. And then that's how rolling luggage was born. And this is a quote from Bernard Sato. I put a strap on the front and pulled it and it worked. And then poof, rolling luggage was invented. So all he did was take existing resources. He stole 4 wheels off his wardrobe. He took a bag that already was there and got a strap, stuck it all together. Boom, rolling luggage. There you go. Number 3, this is a tasty one, Papa John's. So last year, this is what a friend of mine wrote on LinkedIn. And she wrote, this is hands down my favorite Papa John's menu innovation yet. Kudos to Kimberly, Bean, Tom Smith, and the entire team. So last year, in 2023, in January, they created a new menu innovation, which was cheese on the bottom of their pizza. Cheese on the bottom of their pizza. It was Parmesan cheese. So this may sound simple, but it's very delicious. I don't know if you do this, but if you ever want your food to taste better, you should turn it upside down where the flavor is, because that directly hits your tongue. So I think Papa John's realized that most people don't do this, so they put Parmesan cheese on the bottom of the pizza crust, so when they eat it, the Parmesan cheese is hitting their tongue, which makes it more flavorful and yummy, right? So this is what Kimberly Bean said. We have taken cheese where we never had it before, flipping the pizza over and putting it underneath the crust. And they invented a new menu innovation, which I love. So what do you think these 3 examples show? What do you think these 3 examples show? It shows that everyone can innovate. Everyone can innovate. There's nothing rocket science about this, right? Like they reconfigured ink, they took some existing resources and smashed them together, and Papa John's took an ingredient and put it under another ingredient, and there you go, menu innovation. Everyone can innovate. And so now, let's talk about how you can get started. Research shows that 75% of companies say that innovation is a priority, but only 20% are ready and equipped to actually innovate. This is a very large gap between this. And the reason why this gap exists is because people don't know how. So I want you to learn how to become an innovator. Tonight we're diving into that. We've already started it. Again, innovation is a teachable mindset and skill set that anyone can learn. All right, so it's a journey. I just want to say this. It's a journey like anything else. Sometimes there's good days. Sometimes there's harder days, right? There's challenges along the way. But it is, well, you will gain confidence as you do this. So, it might feel like some uncomfortable as you start doing this. But over time, as you practice innovation and as you continue to do this, you will gain confidence. And then finally, it's exciting. I think this is one of the best journeys you can take because think about this. You will be equipped to create a new future for yourself or your team or your organization. You can get to do and create new stuff, whatever it is, to solve the problems that you're facing, whether you're doing this at home or at your work. It's an exciting journey because you get to do it. All right. This is what it looks like. This is a journey to becoming an innovator. I can't teach you all this stuff, but this is a fun infographic I made. But this is what it takes. We learned kind of different things, but today we're starting at the start, which is awakening innovation in all of you. And I'm going to now dive into 3 things you can do right now to get started. The second thing I'm going to teach you is very large. I'm going to teach you innovation, the process of innovation. So it's a big of the three things, but there's three things that I want you to think about right now to get started. And I want you to start applying this to your own work, okay? Whether this is for your business or for yourself, but like don't go applying it to other people's stuff or do this for you, all right, as you get started. Then you could do it for others when you get comfortable with it. All right. So the first thing is simply to make time. And this sounds really basic, but the fact of the matter is if you don't make time to innovate, you will not innovate. It's just a reality of life. If you don't make time to innovate, you will not innovate. I used to work for State Farm Insurance and I used to work for the State Farm Innovation team. And I was a full time innovator for the organization. And my boss said to me, he's like, hey, Leo, if you ever reach 80% capacity, you got to let me know. And I'm going to remove whatever goes above your 80% because you need time to think and innovate. And I was like, what? I'm like, my full-time job is innovation, but if I reach 80%, I was like, okay, I'm like, I'll let you know. And he made this a very a big point for my whole team, and this is actually very, very wise because here's the thing: you need time to see opportunities, right? So like if Bernard, for example, if he wasn't in that customs line, he wouldn't have saw that worker moving the heavy machinery around. He wouldn't have seen it. He had time. He literally had time. He had nothing else to do. So he saw those opportunities. And we need time to think differently because the fact of the matter is status quo in the present is always going to be the same, right? It takes time for us to disrupt the pattern of today for a different future tomorrow. We also need to have white space time, right? So time to think about things, time to mull over things, all that kind of stuff, right? That's why like when, some of your best ideas come when you're not thinking about work. You're taking a shower, you're going for a walk, you're driving, you're walking your dog, when you're doing other stuff, because that's when your brain has this white space to start thinking about stuff. You also need time for ideas to visit you. This concept's from Elizabeth Gilbert, and she believes that ideas will come visit people, but if their minds are too full, it'll go on to the next person. And maybe this, like when you're really busy, you don't have new ideas, right? Because you're just kind of like frantic and all that. But when you have space, these ideas will pop into your head. So you need time for them because then they can come visit you. And then finally, you literally need time to innovate because innovation does take work. It takes time to go through the process of it. So you need time to innovate. So what I'd like you to do is to put time to innovate on your calendar. It's one of the most simplest things you can do. And I want you to do that right now. If you can, take your phone out, get your Outlook open or your notebook, and put innovation time on your calendar. I would encourage you to do this often. If it's like at your lunch, take an hour every day to innovate, however you want to put this on your calendar. But I want you to make it a frequent activity because if you don't, I've worked in corporate. I know corporate life. I'm an entrepreneur now myself, but things fall off the wayside, right? Meetings come, distractions, whatever will take up your time. So if you really want to be disciplined about this, put innovation time on your calendar. Give yourself that gift to see opportunities, think differently, have white space for ideas to visit, to innovate. Put it on your calendar regularly. Please do it weekly at least. Okay, please at least do it weekly. All right. The second thing is learn the innovation process. So we're going to spend a lot of time in this tonight so we can dive in because I want to equip you to learn how to actually do this thing, okay? And I can't teach you like everything there is to know about that because this would take many, many hours. But what I hope to do is give you enough of an overview and a click down so that you can see how you can start applying this in your life. So this is the innovation process. There's 5 steps to it: diagnose, dream, prototype, test, and implement. And you can see it's in an infinity loop because it's not a linear process. Sometimes you'll go backwards and forwards in this whole journey. All right. So, but we'll dive into this in a moment. But I want you to, and let's talk about this first. It's the innovation process is an iterative learning process to problem solving when the way forward is unknown. All right. It's an iterative learning process to problem solving when the way forward is unknown. So whenever you find yourself in a situation where you're like, I don't know how to solve this thing, I don't know that path forward, it's unknown to me, this is when you want to use this innovation process. This is when this innovation process will help you. If you know the answer to your problem, you do not need to innovate. For example, if I knew, hey, I need to upgrade my software from 1.0 to 2.0, I don't need to innovate. My answer is upgrade software to 2.0. We're done. You don't need to go through this process. But if you don't know the way forward, then you want to innovate. Monica, iterative means that it's kind of like a loop, like a learning loop. So you'll do something and then you'll gain some knowledge and then you'll do it again. So it's like a step by step sort of repeated sort of exercise where you'll continually learn. Okay. You're welcome. Yeah. By the way, I'm looking over here because I have multiple screens, so I'm not looking at something else. I'm just looking at the chat over here. So this is what you want to do when you don't know what to do. You want to leverage the innovation process. It also helps to give you confidence to navigate those uncharted waters and step into the unknown. I've used the innovation process throughout my whole life and my career when I've not known how to do things, and it's given me sort of that like next moment of confidence that I can do the next thing because it gives me sort of that data that I need to move forward, and we'll unpack this as we go on. And finally, this process can be used literally for anything. And I literally mean anything. So you can use it at home, but if we think about traditional businesses, you can use this everywhere. Process improvement, you can use it in legal, you can use it in operations, you can use it for financial services, you can use it in IT, you can use it in learning and development, you can use it in talent and HR, anywhere, okay? So there was a comment earlier, hey, would this apply to me if I'm not in a specific industry? The innovation applies to everything. My client portfolio is everyone you could think of: retail, CPG, automotive, financial, medical, educational, government. It's crossed all industries because it's applicable everywhere, and you'll see that as we talk about it tonight. So you can use the innovation process for everything you do, even your own family. If you need to use it for your family, go for using it for your own family. Trading platforms, I don't know if it'll earn you more money, Visi, but I can't speak to that. I'm not a money person, but it might help you learn about maybe things. You might want to try it, actually. You know what? Try it and let me know. I think it would. Maybe. I can't guarantee it, though. All right, so learn the innovation process, and you want to start with diagnose. This is the most important thing that I'll tell you about the process. Most people want to skip diagnose because it's let's just say it's less fun than the other parts of it, where it's like understanding the problem. And a lot of people want to bypass this. There's a very famous quote from Albert Einstein, and he said this: if I had 55 minutes, I had an hour, I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and 5 minutes solving for it. In other words, he'd spend like 92% of his time determining what the problem was before he actually figured out how to solve it, right? So it's a really important thing that you do not skip diagnose. So diagnose is about understanding the problem to solve. It's about understanding the problem to solve. So let me dive into this a bit. So the first thing that you want to do is define the target audience. So y'all are entrepreneurs, right? And so who are the people you are serving, or the peoples you are serving, right? Who are the audiences or audience, right? Who are they? Is it I don't know, maybe it's mothers with kids that are teenagers. I don't know. Or maybe it's a dad, a dad in the 40s. I don't know. But you want to figure out who is the audience that the problem you are solving for is. Like, define them very well. And then once you define them, you want to think about, what is their pain? What is their pain? So let's talk about pain a little bit more. I want you to think about these 4 prompts when you think about people's pain. First is, and you can think about this yourself or your customer, or your ideal client or your audience. What are the pain points? If you want to think about this in your context for yourself today, like, what are the pain points that you have currently that you're like, man, I wish someone could just help me figure this thing out. What bothers you, that really bothers you? Like this woman here, right? Like, what really frustrate you, that make you smack your head? What are those things? What makes you wince? If I were to like punch you in the side. When you identify pain, it's a very powerful thing, because this is a ripe opportunity to innovate, to solve a problem for somebody. Because if you can solve the pain for them, they will love you because you are solving something that really would help them out, right? So I want you to think about these 4 questions. Think about this in the context of yourself, or think about it in the context of your ideal customer or your current customers. What are these? And I want you to think about, I call these things adaptations. Adaptations are like duct tape hacks for problems that people do. So duct tape, right? When you have duct tape, there's like a crack on something, you take some duct tape and just put it on and it's all fixed, right? No. It's like a Band-Aid solution. But duct tape or adaptations are clues for people's pain. So I'm going to give you two examples. So this is a corporate boardroom. And what you're seeing here are four sticky notes on a raised power plug. So I was in this boardroom, and we all need power for our stuff, right? So you plug it in. But for whatever reason, the design of this was that it was elevated. Now, the problem with this is an elevated power plug is a tripping hazard because most people don't think that in a boardroom you would have something that's raised, right? You normally just walk without really looking at it. So this became a tripping hazard for people. So their adaptation to this wasn't to get rid of the plug, which they should, but it was they put four sticky notes on it that were very bright to say, hey, watch out, don't trip on me. That was their adaptation to this pain that they had. Okay. This is my garage here in Markham. So my townhome faces south. And I've had several homes in my life, and this was the only home that's ever bothered me. So my house faces south, and because my house faces south, whenever I tried to close my garage on a sunny day, it would go back up because the sun was hitting the sensor of my garage door. And this was really annoying. You think about this, like every time you're going out and it's a sunny day, which is like a lot of days of the year, my garage would go back up. So I'd have to get out of my car and I'd be like waving my arms around. I'd move my car. Eventually, sometimes I'd have to actually close the garage in the garage, and then I'd have to run to the front of the house and then run around my house and get to my car on the driveway, which was just crazy. So I got my trusty friend the toilet paper roll in a zip tie, and that was my adaptation to my problem. It didn't fix it, but it kind of solved it. And so adaptations are clues that people have pains and they do not know what to do about it. But it's almost like a stopgap. It's like, well, it kind of solves it almost good enough. So it's at least it is. So if you see adaptations, maybe you've created these, maybe your clients have created these, your customers have created these, or you notice these around in people in your life. These are clues that people have pain that they would love if you solved it for them. So look for adaptations around you. All right, so once you figure out the pain, you want to go. Oh, Lisa, so how did the toilet paper roll help? So it actually would block the sunlight hitting that sensor a little bit. So instead of it kind of hitting directly on it, it would hit because it was sticking out more, it would hit the toilet paper roll, and so it would sort of help it. So it wouldn't always being hit all the time. So, but I'll share more with you the real answer to how I actually fixed it later on. So once. Okay, curious about the Apple Palms. They created something people know they didn't need. So no, yeah. So Lisa, yeah. So sometimes we're solving for pain, and sometimes there's opportunities, right? So yeah, in that case, actually, it was a pain. It was a pain, but they didn't know it. Like Steve Jobs noticed that like people would carry those all the bunch of those CD sleeves and all those types of things. So it technically was a pain for people. They just didn't recognize that it was a pain. But sometimes we create an opportunity. I'm not necessarily talking about that particularly today, but because it's a different type of way I would teach that. But absolutely, there's opportunities out there that sometimes it is related to pain, sometimes it isn't, and we just see new ways of doing things, which is still ripe for innovation as well. So when we define what pain is, or when we notice it, we also want to do some research with our target audience because we want to find out, what's going on exactly with them. And so I want to talk to you about observation. Observation is one of the most powerful and cheapest and easiest tool of research that you can use, because observation allows you to uncover the pain points and discover opportunities. So I was already going to talk about this, Lisa. Discover opportunities for people that maybe they don't recognize, but if you observe that, you watch them do something like, oh, maybe they don't know you could do this instead. That's an opportunity for that as well. Observation is a very powerful way to find insights. And I want to share with you a quick story about why observation is so important. So many years ago, I was at a conference, and I was listening to two researchers talk about their experiences. And so they were saying, these two researchers were studying if opening prescription bottles were problematic for the elderly. And so they were actually at a elderly woman's home, and they were sitting in her living room, and they were asking her, hey, do you have problems opening your prescription bottle? And she said, no. And so they're very surprised. They're like, really? And so they're like, okay, okay, if you don't have problems opening the bottle, could you show us how you do that? And she's like, yes, of course. Come with me to the kitchen. So they go with her to the kitchen, and she had one of those meat slicing machines that you see at the supermarket. So she takes a prescription bottle, she puts it on the meat slicing machine, she turns it on, and then whoop, off goes the top. And they're like, what? What? She's like, see, I have no problems opening my prescription bottle. And they're like, you know, that was her adaptation. She had a meat slicing machine, so no problems opening prescription bottle. Not a problem at all. But this is why observation is really powerful, because when people have adaptations, they may not tell you, hey, yeah, that's still a problem for me. She didn't, because she just chops it off every time and no big deal, right? But observation allows you to see if that's actually true or not. And people aren't actually trying to lie. It's just that they do feel, hey, my pain's solved. I have this other thing or whatever it is. And so that's why observation allows you to see more stuff than you may not realize. So it's a really powerful thing to do. So a couple tips on how you can diagnose well to do observation. First, you want to choose something to observe. So whether that's like a customer interaction, maybe it's customer onboarding, offboarding, maybe maybe if you sell a product, you might want to observe how they buy the product, meaning before they even get to it, all that kind of stuff. You want to choose an activity to observe. And then the second thing you want to do is to bring writing tools with you, whether that's digital or analog, it's up to you, but you want to be able to capture what you're seeing, because you will forget if you don't do this. Okay, so bring some writing tools with you. And then you want to actually go observe, like watch them do the thing that you were there to watch them do. All right, so observe what they're doing and make sure you record it. So if possible, if you can tape it or take photos of it, so you can really be able to recall what happened. And then you want to review your notes, okay? Because you actually will forget quite quickly what that looks like. So you review your notes and then be surprised by the insights that you collect, okay? So this is very kind of a quick way to do observation. One pro tip is when you go observe people do things, please do not wear things that are very, let's say, flamboyant. You don't want lots of patterns or tons of colors or all that kind of stuff, because you don't want to be noticeable. You want to kind of blend into the background. So something very neutral, boring, very, not noticeable. That's what you want. You want to blend into the background. But these are the things that you want to do when you start observing others. And you will find that you will find so much insight just by watching people do things. So much insight. So I want to give you a practice of this. On the next slide, I'm going to show you a photo. And I'm going to allow you to look at this photo for like about a minute or two. And I want you to think about these things, these questions right here. What do you see in this picture? What do you notice in this picture? What questions come up for you? What are you curious to know more about this person? And what do you think this person enjoys? Okay? So what do you see? What do you notice? What questions come up for you? What are you curious about? And what do you think this person enjoys? And I want you to type in the chat what you see, and we'll go from there. All right? So I'm going to share with you the photo now. And I'm going to disappear. Take a look at this photo and tell me what you see, what you notice in the chat. What are you curious about? What do you think this person enjoys? Type it in the chat. Let me know. See, Nintendo, rooms with various stuff, teaching kids on Zoom, Squishmallows, wires across the carpet, workout equipment, loves to be comfy and work out, room with plushies. Grace says loves Squishmallows, nice. Stuffed animals facing outwards, video games, controllers are out, all out, likely playing it all the time, loves games, love stuffies. I noticed they have a storage issue. Curious, is this a gym or game room or basement? The projector is a TV. It looks like a family room. Likely have kids and a gamer, place for youth. Wait, that's my room, says Jason. Very diverse. Okay. What are you curious about here? Elle says seems like a basement. Who lives here? Curious the profile of this person. Yes. Who shares this room? What does this person do? What's going on? Are they a student? What's the age of this person? Is it just one person? Is this room in the GTA? Interesting. Who uses this room? Who lives here? Why is there a fan? Is that a closet or a door? Why is there a fan blocking the door entrance? Yeah, a lot of curious things. Is this a girl or boy's room? All right, I want you to now make some guesses. All right, so who do you think lives here? Whose room is this, and where in the house is it? Tony says man, woman, cave. Basement. A lot of people saying basement, shared room. Parent lives here, use it for fitness while entertaining their kids. Very good. Basement family room, young teen. Content creator living in a basement. Interesting. Your man cave. Basement, teenager's room mostly. Single. Considering the short ceiling looks like a basement. Multi-purpose, needing storage cover. Tech CEO starting out. This is a basement of a house who's a teen or 20 child spends time at. Okay, this is great. This is great. Guessing an older person because there's a Nintendo. All right. So, someone wrote your man cave, which I'm thinking you meant me man cave, Brandon. Is that what you're saying, buddy? Yes. Nailed it, buddy. This is Leo's man cave. This is all my stuff. All right. I have no kids. I love squishmallows and stuffies. It's just a thing I love. Is the basement. Good observation on the low ceiling height. I am a gamer. I think Lisa said Nintendo older person. I'm in my 40s, so yes, I have kind of old and new there as well. There's a fan. It is a multi-purpose room, so you can see I work out, play games, hang out, whatever. I actually don't remember what's in the black garbage bag. I think it was closed. I just don't remember because I took the picture a long time ago. The fan is in front of that door because that door is a electrical panel. So there's nothing. I don't really use it very often, so that's why that fan is there. But yeah, and I'm actually. Most people didn't pick up that the carpet is very white and the sofa is very white. So a lot of times people will say, "Hey, there's probably not kids there because." Kids have spills, things like that, right? So, anyway, good job. Good observation. I just want you to notice how much stuff you notice. I gave you like 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes max, to just look at this picture and observe. Notice all the things and the details you were to pick up. Notice the things that you were able to discern from just looking at a photo. This is why this exercise is so important, because the more you do this, the more insights you can gather, the more things that you can see, the more that you can see what is happening with people. So observe. Pick an activity to observe, and then go watch and learn and be surprised by the insights. All right. So hope you enjoyed that activity. All right. Let's move on. And I want you to know from you, what was that like for you? I'm telling you what I think it's like for you, but I want to know what it was like for you to look at that picture for a few minutes. Tony, I loved it. Lisa says that was fun. Fun, yeah. Was that insightful for you at all? Have you observed others before? What was that like? Brain activation for observation. Laura said, yes, felt like a spy. 40 is the new 20. I like it, Jason. It's relatable. I felt like a voyeur, but humbled to get invited in your space. Yes. Started telling myself a story about who lives and what they do. Could be a screenplay. Yeah. Practice reminder for more observations. Yes. Great. This is great. Yeah. So I hope that. No worries. It could have been a parent's basement. It totally could have been. But yeah, I hope that by doing this that you remember to observe. This is why this is so important. Okay. All right. Thanks for playing observation in Leo's basement. All right. So once you research you do some observation, and I can't teach you all the research techniques. There's a lot of different research techniques. Observation is just one of them. You want to actually look at the data. So, if you just did observation, you want to look at the data and see what insights you get from it, right? So you want to look at the data. And then once you've done all this, you want to land it in what I call a diagnostic statement. And I'm going to show you an example of this because it's a very powerful thing when you're thinking about solving problems. So whenever you solve a problem, when you're doing innovation, there's four parts to the diagnostic statement. The first is, who does this problem affect? who does this problem affect? And you want to be specific, right? So, you might say, hey, it's Leo. He's a guy in his mid 40s, married, no kids, lives in the GTA. Be as specific as you can, because that will help dictate, the future of it. So who does this problem affect? You could have one person, or maybe it's a multiple audiences. It just depends on it, right? So that's the first part. Who does this problem affect? Be specific. And then the second thing is you want to think about what their pain is. So what is the pain or pain points that they are experiencing, and give the context for it. What exactly is happening with them? What is their pain? And then you also want to think about is why is it happening? What's causing it to happen? This is the root cause. The root cause of a problem is essentially why it's happening. So if we go back to my toilet paper roll example with my garage, what I realized was that so in your garage there's these two sensors there, and one's a receiving sensor and one's a sending sensor. And this is really sad, by the way. So for the many years that I lived here, I thought that I think it was like the sending sensor was where I put the no, the where I put the toilet paper. I thought that was either the sending or the receiving sensor, and I assumed that it was that way for years. And so the toilet paper roll sometimes worked, sometimes didn't. And then one day I realized I assumed too much, and I actually had to switch the sensor. So what I did was I cut off the sensor on the left side and the right side, and I swapped them. And once I did that, my problems were completely solved. I don't know how the prior owner dealt with this, because my house is a resale. I don't know how they dealt with this, but I'm very sad to admit this. I lived with that problem for like 2.5, 3 years, something like that, with my toilet paper shenanigans. But it was only until I solved the root cause that it actually solved my problem. So you want to determine what the root cause of the pain is for your people, for your clients, for you. What is causing that problem? Because if you solve that root cause, that makes that pain go away. And that's the solution that you want to develop. You want to attack that root cause, because when you get rid of that, then you solve the problem. So you want to figure out, why it's happening. You want to figure out what that root cause is. And then you want to think about, for this audience, for this person that you're solving this for, what happens if you solve it for them? Does that mean peace of mind? Maybe it means more money. Maybe it means confidence. Maybe it means sanity. For me, with my garage door opener situation, it was peace of mind and convenience and less annoyance with my garage, all that stuff, right? So you determine all four of these categories, and then you put it into what I call a diagnostic statement. And it looks like this as an example. So I wrote this as an example for an innovation center I've designed. So at company ABC, there's a lack of foot traffic to the innovation center. This is happening because there's a lack of reasons for most of the employees to go to that innovation center. Solving this problem would result in an increased knowledge of how to innovate, increased collaboration, inspiration, fuel for creativity, and the foundation to create a culture of innovation. And so this is how I break this down. So the who is, this is not that specific, is that I just wrote at company ABC, but again, if you can, talk demographics or things like that, you want to be as specific as you can. And then you talk about, what's the pain? There was a lack of foot traffic at this center. Wait, what was the root cause? The people didn't have a reason to go there. That's what the root cause was. And then you talk about the benefits. So this is what a diagnostic statement would look like for you. And I want you to start using this as you move forward, because this really helps encapsulate in a detailed way what your problem is. And I've never actually used this with investors, but I wonder if you might. You have your pitches, and when you talk to investors, I use this in corporate, right? So when project teams or leaders would come to me, like, hey, why are you working on, project A? You're like, this is my statement. This is why. This is who this affects. This is the problem they're facing. This is why it's happening. And this is what it means if we solve the pain for them. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. I got it. Right. So this is kind of like your elevator pitch in a way, because you can talk about what it is that you do. This is the diagnostic statement. So please take this and use it in your work. All right, let's now talk about dream. So first step is diagnose, right? We're understanding the problem to be solved. And then we move into dream, which is idea generation. So this is a quote: think left and think right, think low and think high. Oh, the things you can think up if only you try. From our friend Dr. Seuss. So dream is about generating ideas to solve the problem. So this is from diagnose, right? So once I know what the problem is, I need to dream up of ideas to solve that problem, right? Now that I know what it is, let's come up with some ideas. So the way you do this is you ideate. You come up with ideas. Think outside the box, all that. I will give you a practical tool that you can use to ideate with. And you also want to consider uh, what's called a HMW statement. It's called how might we? How might we? And this is a very important tool to use when you're coming to dream because you're framing the problem that you're trying to solve in the form of a question. So you'll say, how might we, and then you'll fill in the blank. So for example, here's some examples. How might we give staff more regular reasons to go to the Innovation Center? How might we create more engaging training? How might we reimagine a new onboarding process? How might we serve our clients better? How might we engage a hybrid workforce? Insert the blank with the problem you're trying to solve. How might we do this? And the reason why this is a very powerful statement is because it's in the form of a question, and our brains love answering questions, and we love answering questions. And it doesn't suggest to you that there is one way to do it. In fact, if I were to ask you any of these questions, there's so many ways you can answer this. It's an invitation to possibility. It's an invitation to, like, there's so many ways to do this, right? If I say, how might we serve our clients better? There's infinite ways to answer that question, right? So it's an invitation to explore. That's why how might we's are powerful. So when you're brainstorming either as an individual or as a team, you can use how might we. If you're doing it for yourself, you can say how might I if you want to be grammatically correct. But use this statement in your brainstorming. Okay. Now, I want to share with you a tool that I call photo serendipity. So a lot of times we tell people to think outside the box, which is fine, but nobody actually knows how to think outside the box. So this is a tool to help you think outside the box. And the way it works is you leverage the power of random photos as inspiration. Okay. So I'm going to actually have you practice this and put you to work. All right. So the way this works is very simple. Before me, you see are 12 photos. And all I want you to do right now is to pick a photo that you like. So I'm going to go, I think in my next slide, it's full screen. No, not yet. Let's just go here real quick. I'm going to go full slides. So let's see. Let me just disappear. Right now, I want you to look at these photos, and I want you to pick one. You don't have to have any good reason why you picked it. You just want to pick it because you like it. Everybody got that? Give me a thumbs up in the chat or emoji thumbs up. Perfect. Okay. Everybody got a photo? All right. Now, what I want you to do is hopefully you have like a piece of paper. If you don't, grab your phone or, you're on your computer, so you can open like a notepad or something like that. All I want you to do is to type out what you see. Okay, so don't type this in the chat. You can just type this, like locally on your phone or whatever it is, or if you have a pen and paper. I want you to write down what you see in the photo that you picked, but I want you to use your five senses. I want you to imagine using your five senses. So, imagine that you were actually in that photo, at that photo. What would it smell like? What would it sound like? What would it feel like? What might it taste like? And then what does it look like? So, for example, if I was at the ocean on the far right there. What does it feel like? It probably would feel cold, right? What does it taste like? Probably would taste salty because it's salt water. What does it sound like? It probably sounds like water breaking over, waves crashing, right? What does it look like? It looks blue, it looks white, things like that. So right now, just write down as much as you can of what you observe. What are the characteristics of what you see in that photo? And then again, use your imagination, use those other senses, and just write down attributes that you see. Okay, I'm going to give you, let's say, maybe 2 minutes for you to do this. No right or wrong here. You're going for quantity. You're just writing down things that you notice using your five senses. All right, about 20 more seconds to just write down whatever final things you are seeing in the photo. Okay, now what I'd like you to do is I want you to look over the list that you just wrote down. Okay, so review the list of things that you just wrote down, and I want you to circle 3 to 5 things that you find interesting. All right, so review the list that you just created and circle 3 to 5 things that you find interesting from this list. Again, no right or wrong here, just you just find interesting from all the things you've written down. 3 to 5 things. Give that a little circle. Okay, does everyone have 3 to 5 things circled on their list? All right, thank you. Now, what I'd like you to do is now you have a short list of 3 to 5 things you've circled. Look over those 3 to 5 things and star one thing. That's the most interesting thing that you have circled. Star one thing. You're like, this is the most interesting thing that I wrote down. Everybody got something. Something starred. Like Vissy with dim sum. I'm a big fan of dim sum. All right, so everyone's got something starred. That's one thing. Okay, here is your challenge. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna give it a try, and you can do this. I promise. Okay. You don't have to use this. How might we? I just kind of created a generic one, but I want you right now to. You're going to use the thing that you starred, and you're going to answer. Oh, over there. This question. How might we improve networking experiences? If you don't like this question, you can use this for your business. But I want you to try using the inspiration that you just starred and make a connection to that. How might you answer? What kind of idea could you create from that source of inspiration that you starred to answer this question? If you want to play with this one, please do. How might we improve networking experiences? Use your point of inspiration. I'm going to give you just a couple minutes to write down any ideas that you have. This may seem hard. I do this exercise with a lot of people. Everybody can do it. So if whatever reason you're like, oh, this is impossible, I can't do it, look at the other 3 to 5 things you circled and choose something else. But I believe you can do it. So you can use a prompt, how might we improve networking experiences? You're going to answer that with your inspiration source. What can you extrapolate from that concept to answer that question? Okay? And if you don't want to answer that question, answer something that's for you. All right, so I'll give you, let's say, 3 minutes to come up with an idea, and then I'm going to have maybe 1, 2 of you share what you come up with. Sound good? All right. Give it a shot. You can do this. Let me play some music for you. One more minute. All right. All right, welcome back. I am curious what you came up with. It looks like some of you folks are already writing your answers in, which is cool. What I'd love to know is what picture did you choose? What was the thing you starred? And what is your answer to how might we improve networking experiences? So if you want to type that in the chat, I'm going to read some of them because I think they're interesting. But let's see, what do you have? What was this like for you? Tell me what you thought. All right, so it looks like Lisa said inspiration from the cat. We can slowly approach people and offer them something of value while getting something from them. Yes, we can. How to fix a cold nose, apply a hot towel. Hmm? Anybody want to come live? You can also talk on camera. It doesn't have to just be me too. I'm open to that as well. If somebody wants to share what they came up with, or we don't have to. That's okay too. Let's see. Leela, I think, says discovering connections between photos reveals a beautiful truth. Whether viewed up close or from afar, each of us have is unique and amazing world. Some excel in building urban landscapes, while others shine in the realm of art. Together we create a verse. Yes, we do. Absolutely. What was this activity like for you? So let's break this down a bit. Was it challenging, exciting, fun? What was this like for you? To help you think something different? Looks like Carlene. Can we choose Carlene to speak? You are muted.
Okay, here we go. I'm a musician, among other things. And so having the music, being inspired by the water, the ocean, the sea, was really, resonating with me. Just looking at how we go to certain spaces to help our creativity, to help us think clearly, to sort of liberate our minds. So that's what I was thinking of when you played the music and I saw that blue ocean.
Thank you for sharing. Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Um, let's see. Lisa says thinking outside the normal brainstorming process and how completely unrelated images can still help a problem, solve a problem. Yes. Yeah, I love this technique because it's really really random inspiration that can help solve our problems. Sabrina, hopefully I said your name correctly. You want to unmute yourself and share?
Yes, so I chose the mountain pick, and I figured like after a long walk, it would feel like peace, and you would just see the beauty of the view. And in terms of the networking, bringing the idea of a peaceful environment would really help, because depending on who you are and what peace would look like to you, it might be being around people that are similar, doing activities where you guys can bond or connect, or just being in an environment like if you're an introvert, where you don't have to um, forcefully have conversation with people, but maybe doing activities that would be comfortable for you or something like that. Just having that peaceful energy and being able to get something out of it without feeling that you're uncomfortable.
Love that. Thank you for sharing. That's great. I would love that myself personally. Thank you. All right.
Thanks.
All right. Let's. I have a QR code for you to scan. I have a random photo generator. So if you like this tool and you want random photos generated for you, go to this QR code. Go to this QR code. So it's on my website. It's aboundinnovation.ca/photo-serendipity. But all this does is generate random photos for you. Now you know how to use the tool. So whenever you want to brainstorm on whatever it is, you can use this tool. Okay. And this will always be different because your how might we will change, right? So you'll be using this for your work, your business, your challenges, and the photos will change. So you have a plethora of infinite possibilities waiting for you over there. So please give that a scan and you can use it. All right. All right. I'm going to hopefully, you know what, actually, let me just type it in my browser and then I'll put it in the chat so you have that as well. Give me a second here so you all can access it. There you go. Okay, let's move on to the next part of the innovation process. So once you dream and you do ideation, so for some people, actually, idea generation is easy and evaluation is hard. And then for other people, idea generation is hard and evaluation is easy. I'm just going to give a sip of water. So I wanted to give you a tool for evaluation so you can use this when, let's just say you have lots of ideas and you don't know which one to choose. How do you choose? So it's called polygon mapping or polygon map. And it looks like this. So basically the way this technique works is it's very customizable. So you can have as many criteria as you want, but basically it's a way to have a very objective way of evaluating ideas. So for example, let's just say you had 4 criteria that you wanted to ensure that your idea meets in order for you to select it to move it on. Like maybe it's, I don't know, no tech is one, or very, very cheap to implement, customer centric, easy to use. I don't know what it might be, but you create the criteria before you evaluate the ideas, and you can use a 3-point measure or up to 5 or 7-point, up to you for each criteria. So this is a 3-point measure, and you can see that there's 4 criteria that an idea needs to meet in order for me to decide. And then you can decide as a team or as yourself that, hey, you know what, I'm only going to move an idea forward if, you know, it ticks 3 on all categories, for example. You can make up whatever that looks like for you, but it's a very objective way to look at an idea. So here's an example of, this is a very common way that people like to evaluate ideas on three different things: desirability, feasibility, and viability. So desirability is like, you know, how desirable would this idea be, this product be for the customer? Is that like a 1 point, not so much, or up to 3, you know, up to you. Feasibility is how feasible is it for like me as a person or company to implement an idea like this? Like, is it a huge drain on resources? Is it completely unfeasible? I don't have the tech, I don't have the resources to actually implement this thing. And viability is like, does this make sense for my business? You don't have to use these 3 categories. I'm just giving you an example. And so viability is like, you know, does this make sense for my business to go ahead with? You know, would this idea just last for a year and then not really make sense, right? So is it a viable option for us to actually pursue? So, you know, I could measure my ideas moving forward with desirability, feasibility, and viability. And I might say, hey, I want every idea to hit 3s on all categories, unless otherwise I'm killing it, right? So this way it allows you to have a very objective way of looking at it. All right. So you decide what the criteria is for yourself, your team, and then you evaluate. So as an example, here's like a sort of a fake way to do it. Let's say it's a 4 criteria thing, and this is ideal 1. So I've decided that, you know, this idea, if you look at it visually, it looks okay. I mean, it's 2 in 2 parts, it's 3 in 1, but then it's 1 in the other. So this idea is not really measuring up, you know, versus idea 2 is, well, this idea looks a lot better. You know, it's hitting 3 in 3 categories and 2 in another category. And so this is a nice visual way to evaluate ideas, because you can actually see a drawing and you can compare them to one another. And, you know, you could say, you know, if the idea doesn't hit 3s in all categories, it's out. Or you could say, hey, if it's like this, maybe there's ways that we can improve it so that, you know, in criteria 2, we can get a 3. So I want you to consider using a polygon map when you're evaluating ideas, because it gives you some insight into how you can do that. Right? It's a very powerful way, very, very objective. I really, really like this tool. So that is the polygon map. Any questions before I move on to this? All right. I know we're sort of merging Q&A as we go along, which is totally fine because it's a lot of content. All right. Let's now talk about prototype. So prototype, you want to develop like a thing. So you're putting form to your idea. So when you're coming out of dream, you have an idea that you want to go ahead with, and in order to get that idea into reality, you prototype it. This is where like the rubber meets the road, because both diagnosis and dream, they're very kind of cerebral, heady things. Prototype is when like people can react to something, like a thing, something they can react to. So you want to develop the prototype, and you want to consider what's called an MVP, which is a really important concept. So an MVP is a minimum viable product, a minimal viable product. And what this is you're trying to develop a thing that has just enough features. So you're not like developing the entire solution. And the reason why you're not developing the entire thing is because you want to avoid wasted time and resources. Because when we innovate, when we're doing new things, we don't like fully know if it's going to work or not. We don't fully know if the customer will want it or not. And if you spend all the time developing it all, full feature set, everything's out, you're going to invest a lot of resources, and it's possible that it may not hit all the marks. So you don't want to you don't want to use that kind of time and dollars if you don't need to, right? So you're just creating just enough of the feature set, just enough of the product in order for the customer to decide, hey, yes, this is a thing that I would, I want to buy from you. So like think about what's the simplest version of a prototype you can create. The simplest version of a prototype you can create. Let me give you two examples real quick, or one example. So for example, if I wanted to determine purchase intent, an MVP might look like I have a buy it now button that doesn't actually work on a website, and it just shows my product and be like, hey, the product is $69. Will you buy it? And if they click it, and maybe it makes a fake checkout, or maybe it just says sign up for an email, that shows that there's intent because they actually click the thing. Or you could even say, put a deposit of $1, something like that. The product doesn't even actually have to exist, right? I just can determine purchase intent from a buy it now button, versus like creating the entire website, all the graphics, it works on mobile, it has nice polished videos, product shots, blah, blah, blah. That would take a lot of money and resources, and you don't necessarily need all of that stuff. I might be able, if I just want to know purchase intent, I could put a button there, have a short description and an image, and that's it, right? So I want to give you an example of this in real life. Are you familiar with Zappos, the online shoe retailer? So the founder, his name is Nick, I'm going to butcher saying his name, Swinburne. And so in 1999, he wanted to sell shoes online. And back in the 90s, this did not exist. Okay, so you gotta dream back with me a little bit. So nobody's selling shoes online. So you want to know, like, can I sell shoes online? So what he does is he buys a domain called shoesites.com. Okay, so he creates this domain, shoesites.com, and he goes to retail stores, like shoe stores, and he takes pictures of shoes from those stores, and he uploads it to his website, and he puts it online. So he's like, basically, I found a cool pair of Nike at whatever store. He takes a picture of it and he sticks it on his website. And he wanted to see if people would order. So if they actually ordered the shoe, he would actually go to the store himself and buy it at full price and then ship the shoe to them, like literally himself. He doesn't have like a fulfillment center or distribution center. He has no inventory. He literally is like, you bought a pair of Air Jordans, then I go to the store, I buy the Air Jordans, and then I go home and I ship it to you with FedEx or something, right? So he did manual fulfillment. And what he wanted to know was, will people buy shoes online? And he determined that behavior by doing this. Really simple concept, right? So he validated the market opportunity that people would actually purchase. He actually saw purchase behavior. And he used that data to inform the website design when he actually had a real website selling actual inventory. He used that data from this this test, this MVP test, and used that to inform the website design. And it was an incredibly low investment for him, right? He had literally no inventory. He's literally taking photos himself and uploading it to his web. He didn't hire a fancy photographer or any of that stuff. And this was such a strategic way for him to test it. Think about this, like if this idea had failed and he invested in a full e-commerce website, that would have costed him so much money, right? But he did it cheap, he did it scrappy, and he was able to test the concept that he wanted, and he validated it. And it was a big, wonderful success story, right? Shoesites.com became Zappos, and Amazon bought it for $1.2 billion in 2009. Amazing. And think about this. It started with no inventory, zero inventory. It was fake. He just went and bought the products that people wanted and then he fulfilled it, right? So this is an example of an MVP and why it's so powerful. So make sure you do the MVP in your prototypes. All right, and then you want to think about fidelity. There's two types of fidelity: low fidelity and high fidelity. The MVP was an example, kind of pretty much of a low. So let's talk about low fidelity. Here's some characteristics about them. They're cheap and scrappy. So the materials that you use in low fidelity prototypes are cheap, like paper, foam core, pipe cleaners, Play-Doh, you know, Lego, whatever things that are not expensive to use. It's really easy to put together. Foam core, that type of stuff. It's very, very cheap and scrappy materials. It also has what's called low clarity. So when you have a low fidelity prototype, you don't have the final design. You know, if we were doing a website, you wouldn't have like all the beautiful images and all that. You would have a wireframe. You would have very low detail, low granularity. You wouldn't be able to actually see all that type of detail because it's not there. And finally, it has high risk because you would never implement to the market a low fidelity prototype because it's nowhere close to being ready for launch. But it's cheap and scrappy and it can get you to where you want to go. Low fidelity goes way further than you think. So my encouragement to you is to always start with lo-fi because it'll get you further than you actually think. So always start with lo-fi. High fidelity prototypes have these characteristics. They are more expensive, so they will be closer to a final product, finished materials. You know, maybe you're using things like metal, right? Things that are more expensive to use. It costs more. It takes more time to build. High fidelity prototypes are closer to the final product. They have high clarity. So if we're using the website example, you would see images, you might see videos, you know, a graphic designer would have done it. It's closer to the final product and people can see sort of the minute details in the thing. And there's lower risk to put it out there because you're actually close to the final thing. You know, you probably wouldn't go even with a high fidelity prototype to launch, but it has a lower risk because it's gone through the cycles of learning and prototyping and testing and all of that stuff. And sometimes you actually do need to go high fidelity. It's just the reality. So for example, let's just say we were testing children's playgrounds. You're not gonna test kids on Play-Doh or paper, construction paper, toilet paper rolls, right? You would need the metal bars and things like that as well. Sometimes, depending on the work that you're doing, high fidelity is a must. Maybe it's production equipment that you're working on. You know, you're in a restaurant business. You need the actual fryers and things like that. You can't do a low fidelity, like a cheap, scrappy material. You need the actual types of things. So sometimes you do have to go high fidelity, but low fidelity goes further than you think. So you should always try to start with low fidelity. So that's just quickly about prototyping fidelity. So what makes sense for you? Does it make sense to start with low fidelity? Could you get away with doing like a napkin sketch that helps communicate the idea? Maybe it would work, right? Or do you need something high fidelity? It just depends on the business you're in and the project you're working on. So what makes sense for you? So these are the two kind of very important things. You want to develop your prototype and you go for the MVP and then consider the resolution low or high. All right. Then once you've prototyped it, you want to test it. So you need to test your prototype to gain insight and improve. It's very, very important. You want to test and analyze your prototypes. That's the only way that you'll know if they work or not. You have to give it a try, basically. And so you want to create a plan when you test your stuff. So here's some key pointers I would suggest to you to create the plan. The first thing is that you want to list your assumptions. So are there any assumptions that you're going in with when you're testing your prototype? Are you assuming that, I don't know, customers will love it, or you know, we know we have electricity, we have all the, what are the assumptions that you're making? Write them down. You have them, so it's good just to write them down. The second thing you want to consider are defining your hypothesis. So when you test something, you know, what are you thinking might come true? You know, for example, like I redesigned an innovation center. My hypothesis was that when I did that, people would come to it, right? That was a hypothesis of mine. So what are the hypotheses that you have for your test? What do you hope to happen in your test? You want to write those things. What do you think is going to happen? You're going to write those down. The third thing you want to do is to define the expected outcomes. What are you hoping that happens from this test that you do? Do you hope that people click the buy now button? Do you hope that people use it and they're delighted? You know, they're like, yes, this is the best thing ever. What do you expect to happen? What are your expected outcomes? You want to write those down because that way you can see if you meet them or not, right? What does success look like? At the end of this test, what would make you have balloons and you're like, yes, this did it, right? What would success look like for you, the test? Is it everyone wanting to buy the product? If it not breaking and busting out on you? Or is it the screws don't come out? What does success look like for the test? And then fifth is you want to think about like what exactly are you testing? Are you testing a component of your product? Is it the entire thing? Is it a journey that they're going through? Like what exactly are you testing? You want to define those things. And then you want to think about how are you testing? Like what is the person actually going to do? You want to think through all those details of the actual test. Like you're creating the plan for them, right? So what are you testing and how are you actually testing it? Are they going to interact with the thing? Are you going to give them guided prompts? What will that look like? And then finally, who will test it? And the who should actually be your target audience. You're designing this for their problem, right? When you think back to the diagnostic statement, you have that target audience and what their pains are, and you also have what that root cause is and what it means if you solve for them. So the only way you know if this works if you test your prototype with that audience, right? They will tell you that did not solve the problem at all. Okay, maybe I need a new prototype, right? So you want to bring in your target audience. And if this is like, I think going back to Lisa, if the customer doesn't even know that they need this thing, then who do you envision would be the person that should test this? Who is your ideal customer that you want to test it with? So I want you to think about these 7 things when you're going to create a test because you need a plan for it. It's not going to go well if you don't create the plan. All right. Next, you will iterate. So testing and analyzing, you'll do iteration. So iteration, again, is once you test something and you have the users give you feedback on it, you want to incorporate that feedback into the prototype and then evolve it and then test it again. And so you're going to go through this cycle. You're gonna prototype, you're going to test it, you're going to analyze, you're going to incorporate feedback and re-prototype it, rinse and repeat. And as you do this, eventually what you'll see is that all the kinks get ironed out. You figure it out with them, the audience, all the problems are getting solved. And eventually you're going to get ready to be able to implement. So you're going to go through an iterative process where you're going back and forth, refining, adjusting, all of that as you're gaining insight from your test. So I used to work at Chick-fil-A, which is a big restaurant chain, and I designed their innovation center. And not that I didn't have any idea what I was doing. I never designed an innovation center before. This is my first one. So there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of things I didn't know about the process. So I went through the whole cycle of prototyping and tests. And so my low fidelity prototype you can see over there is like some wire sketches. We did some wire, like just sketching of the floor plan, and then we went to chipboard, which is a 3D model of it, to kind of adjust. And then you can see beside me over here, we put it into foam core, which was very easy because then we could see if like spaces were too big, we could literally lift up the wall and move it, things like that. So it was very scrappy. Test and learn was really quick for us. And then eventually we kind of made it a bit more, design and things like that. So this is an example of testing and learning. And I had failures. I created stuff that didn't work at all. I had a one room that nobody ever used. I thought people would use it. I thought it was cool. Nobody ever used it. It was not necessary. And then this thing over here is it's called the 20 questions booth. And it featured Alexa, and I was hoping that people would pick up on question asking. Nobody ever walked into it. It was just this kind of failed experiment. So I got rid of it. And then I also went through iterations. So this was one room called the understand room. And in 2018, it looked like this. And you can see my 20 questions thing there. And then in 2019, we redesigned it because we had a year of learning. As staff went through this room, we figured out that some things were useful and some things weren't. So in the following year, we iterated the design and we took what we learned and then we put it back into it to make it even better. So this is what testing and learning and iteration and prototyping and testing and learning and iteration looks like. It's going back and forth between this, cycling back and forth, taking the feedback that you learn into your design. Okay. Finally, let's talk about implementation. This is about making the finished solution a reality. So you've gone through tests, you've worked out all the kinks. Now your design, your prototype is ready to go out the door. And so you're putting it into the real world. And I'm not going to teach too much on this because a lot of people are really good at implementation. So you obviously want to plan the activities that you want to do, and then you want to deliver it, right? So plan first and then deliver it. So the one tool I will share with you here that's really important is the action plan calendar. I love the action plan calendar because what you'll do is you will break up, and this is the way I like it. You these are the categories that you have. You have now. So what can you do right now? What's week one? What's a week from now? What's month one? Well, a month away from now. What do you want? What should you be doing? And then Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and beyond. And in the column under that, you'll write down all the different activities that you need to do. What are the major things that you need to do? So, for example, I might say, most launch plans would have like marketing, legal, communications, whatever it looks like, working with different suppliers, all that kind of stuff. You write down all the different activities and you'll categorize it within the quadrant that it belongs to. Is that a Q3 activity? Is it a Q1 activity? Is it a Q4 activity? Is it now? Right? So you'll take all the different things that you need to do and then stick it on your action plan. I like to do this with real sticky notes and a big wall and like literally stick stuff on it. If you don't have that, use a digital whiteboard. That works well too. But this way you can see all the stuff that you need to do, and then you know by time when it needs to happen, and you can map that out. So this is the action plan calendar. So I hope you use that when you get to implementation. So this is your like quick cheat sheet of what I just shared in a very kind of summarized way. This is the innovation process. And actually, why space? I'm happy to share an actual slide. This slide, so just remind me, and I'll send this out to you so all the participants can get a copy of this, so you can stick it on your wall or something like that. But this way, if you want a sort of high level view of the entire innovation process, this is what it is. You start with diagnose, you go through dream, go through prototype, you go through test, and you implement. And again, it's a iterative cycle. So make sure that you go through this, and that's the definition. Those are the stages and then the tools. Okay. So yes, yeah, Alina, just remind me, and then I'll send this as a graphic, then everyone can get a copy. Or yeah, okay. All right. So the third thing is that I want. So that was number 2. That's point number 2. Number 3 is I want to encourage you to collaborate, because collaboration truly drives innovation. And the reason why this is because I want you to think about who is cognitively diverse from you. Cognitively diverse from you. That means that they think differently from you. They might, you might be an introvert. They might be an extrovert. Maybe they've lived in different countries or cities than you. They have a different educational background. They've worked in a different industry from you. If you're a certain Myers-Briggs type, they're the different type of Myers-Briggs type. They have completely different skills. You want to look for people that do not think like you, because they will give you insights that you will never have on your own. As an example, my wife works in HR. She's very systematic, process-oriented, really good at that stuff. I'm awful at that stuff. I'm an innovation, creativity, Lego series play guy. We're really different. Whenever I work on things, I always ask my wife, and I'll be like, I ask her about everything. Hey, what do you think of this handout? Hey, what do you think of this session title? Hey, what do you think of my talk? What do you think of my slides? I ask her about everything because I want to know from her HR brain what she sees. And she gives me things that I would never think of because she has a very different brain than me. She's cognitively different than me. And so I want to encourage you to go seek out people to collaborate with, and the nice thing, if you're in the Y space community or in the environment, you could talk with other founders, get other ideas from one another, work on, you can collaborate together to see how you might partner or whatever it is, but to get different ideas from each other, because they will truly help drive your innovative ability to think differently about your stuff. So please learn from one another, collaborate with someone that's not like you. Okay, because we actually will gravitate towards people that think like us, because it's technically it's easier, right? If I like to work with people like, let's brainstorm, like, yeah, everything's possible. I don't want to talk about why things won't work. Like, no, I want to talk about what could be. But I need the people that would tell me, like, Leo, that's just literally not going to happen. Give me all the reasons. Tell me why. Like, that won't work because of this. Like, maybe you should think about these things. We need people like that in our lives to help complement us so that we will think differently. So please do collaborate with other people that are cognitively diverse from you. All right, so this is a summary of these 3 things that I share with you. Make time, put innovation time on your calendar. I gave you a deep dive in the innovation process. And again, this is not the deepest way we can go into it. I was just hoping to give you like an overview with like a click into it. There's a lot more we can talk about on all the parts of the process, and then please collaborate with people that are cognitively different than you. All right. So let's recap. So we talked about a lot of stuff in this past 2 hours. What is innovation? It's creating a new future by transforming ideas into value. We talked about why it's needed. What do innovators do? Who can innovate? Those three examples of everyday innovation, and then now how you can get started. So in closing, what I'd like to share with you is that innovation helps you create a new future. Everyone can innovate, and you can become an innovator. All right, so I'm going to skip the Innovators Manifesto because I want to give some more Q&A because I went a little bit longer than I thought. But thank you so much for your time. I want to share with you an innovation newsletter that I have, which I call Indisruptible. It's how you can outthink, outcreate, and outshine status quo. So if you want to sign up for that, it's free. I talk about innovation things, creativity tips, all sorts of things. So you can scan that QR code and sign up for the newsletter because I post quite regularly. So I'd love to have you join. And I will throw that in the chat and some of my contact details as well. And finally, I am a LinkedIn learning instructor, which with 4 courses on LinkedIn. These are 4 courses that I have. If you have LinkedIn Premium, you can get access to these courses for free. If you don't have LinkedIn Premium and you want access to free for these, connect with me on LinkedIn and then DM me and I can send it to you for free, but I have to manually send it to you. So if you don't have LinkedIn Premium, but you still want access to these 4 courses, you can still just connect with me on LinkedIn, message me, and I will happily share them with you. So I'll put back my newsletter code, but thank you so much. I hope you found this helpful. I'd love to know what you thought, and I will stick around for Q&A, but thank you very much for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Leo. That was absolutely incredible. And honestly, as a student as well, I have such a different pre-notion of what innovation or being an innovator is. But this is super cool and it was so great. And thank you once again. We will open up for questions, as many as we could get. So if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat and we'll get to them. But just to start off, Leo, just out of curiosity, I did have a really quick question. Um, why do you think innovation has changed and become so important, and why do you think people don't realize it? Just following up on what I was saying about how I had such a different pre-notion, I feel like that's changed a lot, and it's not that I would have associated innovation with just entrepreneurs, but how can we be innovators in our daily life, and how do you think that's changed?
Yeah, I feel like innovation is very much like a buzzword these days. Like you hear it all the time, but then nobody teaches you how. And I mean, really, it's like using creative principles and techniques. I have a graphic design degree, so what was really interesting about my art background is that I became an innovation. I'm an innovator because of my art background, and I entered innovation because of my art background. You know, so I was at State Farm Innovation. You heard me say that, and I think businesses always valued thinking differently, but maybe perhaps we never knew how to do it. And so I think there is an emphasis on thinking different, especially now with the world of AI and all this, robots taking over everything and taking over our jobs. I think there's a spotlight on why this is important, but it is not something that everyone gets to learn, right? Like, I
Yeah.
think in some ways, I'm fortunate that I have a degree in creativity, basically. And so I've been taught different techniques and skills over my lifetime to keep me thinking this way and keeping fresh. But, our educational systems don't necessarily teach us that there's many possibilities. Sometimes we're taught that there's only one possibility, A equals B, A plus B equals C, right? And that's the only way it is. So, what I would say is wherever you are in your innovation journey, you can always accelerate at any point. And these days, what I'm thinking about is that inspiration is really important because we don't get enough of it. And I try to surround myself with like nature and other people that I find interesting. And I'm always learning and discovering new things because the world is a source of inspiration for all of us. So that's how I keep fresh. And I'm not plugging my newsletter, but that's where I stick that stuff. Like I get inspired by everything. I wrote an article last year about how bowling inspires innovation. Like, because I used to be a terrible bowler, and then a friend of mine gave me some tips, and I became a really good bowler in like the same session. And I was like, I don't know how this is happening, but it's innovation related, so I'm gonna talk about it. So keep yourself freshly inspired by And I think people really do inspire us. So find people that you're inspired by and follow them, connect with their content, learn from them, and these days also, like, people are so willing to give their time. I mean, I'm always happy to chat with people. I think it's great. It's fun to learn from other folks. So, why not try reach out and see what happens?
I
Hopefully that
really
helps.
appreciate that. Of course, yeah. And I'm just going to go to the questions in the chat as well. We had Lara ask, where do you find that most people spend time in the innovation process stages? Is it diagnostic?
Uh, I would recommend that most people spend time in diagnose, but a lot of people skip it. Like when I used to work in corporate, a lot of people would come to me and they'd be like, "Hey, we're ready to go to dream." And I was like, "Oh yeah." I'm like, "What's the problem you're solving for?" I'm like, "Well, it's this." And I'm like, "How do you know that that's true?" And they're like, "Oh." And I called it something different, but I'd be like, "Let me see your diagnostic statement." And they'd show it to me. I'd read it, and I'm like, "Are you certain that this is true?" And they're like, "Oh, no." And I'm like, how relevant is your data for this? And they're like, "Oh, it's like 10 years old." And I'm like, "Really? You think that would be relevant still?" And they're like, "Oh." So a lot of people like to bypass it. Implementation, well, I would say, like, generally prototyping, testing, and implementation, that does take a lot of time. But it's also the things that humans are probably most skilled at, that probably from most business backgrounds or educational backgrounds are good at. The diagnose and the dream parts, those are like more fuzzy for people. So I would say it's better to thoroughly understand the problem you're solving for before you move on, because if you're off at one point at the start, you're going to be off at the end. And I've known teams that created the wrong solutions for the wrong problems because they didn't spend the time. So I can't say that it's really one more than the other, but most people like to skip diagnose or spend a very small amount of time, and then, because it's more fun to create ideas and then put them out in the world and see what happens, right? But you don't want to be the segue, right? The segue could have been this really cool thing, but now it's like a mall cop type solution, right? Where you don't want to creating time and effort like that. So,
That does make sense. Also, on a side note, we also have questions asking about what presentation features you were using.
oh, for like all this stuff,
Yeah.
all my buttons. Well, I met a guy who, some of this is through a program called OBS Studio. So I'm streaming. So basically, I have a bunch of, here. Let me go full screen here. I have a bunch of, like, things I can press. I don't know if I can show this. Like, I have these, like a stream deck, and I have three actually. So I can press a bunch of buttons and things happen. So for example, I can press this and then confetti falls down, or I can have like emojis. So I programmed this into this software that I have, and I press buttons and things like that. So when I press a button, something different happens. So I can press this and a slide appears. So I'm using OBS Studio to share, like, different, they're called scenes that I've set up. But like emojis that are showing up and like the poll that you saw, that's through this guy that I follow. If you want more details, I can send it to you. But there's like this genius Zoom guy that I met that has programmed a lot of stuff behind the scenes, that I can press things and other interesting thing happen. So just send me a message and I can send some of that stuff to you.
Yeah, that is super helpful. Also, I think there's a lot of people see this bit of an echo, so I think it'd just be helpful if either I'll text the messages back to you in the chat, but I think the echo is it might be from my end. Oh, I think it's slightly better. Okay,
Perfect.
perfect. Um, yeah, so back to the questions. We had Jeanette asked, how do you define an innovation center?
An innovation center. Oh, probably referring back to the thing I was talking about. So I worked at Chick-fil-A, and they had a 30,000 square foot innovation facility. So it was an entire building, set for innovation. And what I did there was I took over the space and I made it into like like learning zones. So all the stuff that I taught you, I had rooms where you could wander through them and you can literally read content on the wall. So basically, to and then you could see like different tools and techniques and things that you could actually learn about, and then you could use them in the room. So there's meeting space and stuff like that. And what was interesting about that innovation center is we prototyped a lot of stuff. So we would literally mock up, like, Chick-fil-A is a restaurant company, we would mock up full size restaurants in foam core in the building, or like drive-throughs or whatever. The first Chick-fil-A in Toronto was at Bloor and Young or whatever it was. We mocked that entire restaurant in foam core inside Hatch, the innovation center. That entire footprint was in foam core because I was there because I used to live in Atlanta, Georgia, and so I was really nosy because I am from Toronto, and so I remember seeing that. So we actually prototyped stuff in that building to be able to test. So innovation centers can mean a lot of things. A lot of times it's for prototyping and testing ideas, but it can also be learning. So it just kind of depends on what organizations want to do with it. But traditionally, innovation centers are generally like a prototyping space.
That is super cool. I find it really interesting to hear about like food chains, for example, and the amount of process and strategy that goes on in the background. Very cool. We have a few more questions. Dan, after the innovation process, how can we assess if there's a real market opportunity?
Yeah, so I didn't talk too much about that. I mean, it's within the innovation process, you should see that. So I'm not, very admittedly, Dan, I am not a financial guy like MBAs. So implementation is a very specific skill set. Um, I would say in the prototype test implementation, that's the time when you want to be assessing that. So your test could be with like market areas, for example, depending on the idea that you're working on. You may want to test a market area. So I can only go back to my like Chick-fil-A days where our test was a market area test, which was a geographic region. It was several U.S. states that would actually test viability or feasibility of a certain product, menu item, things like that too. So depending on how big it is, that's the time when you want to be doing those things. When you do the financials and all things, I cannot teach you those things because I'm not very poor with numbers. It's just not my thing. I'm good on the fuzzy stuff on the front, but that's the part where you want to kind of focus in on there.
Okay, perfect. That's super helpful. And last two questions. At what point is IP protection needed? Is there a low-cost way to implement before possible commercial success?
Yeah, IP is an interesting thing. If you believe that the product that you have is unique, you want to patent your stuff. Like so, I have patents from my State Farm days, and you want to be able to patent those things that you think are very unique in the marketplace because if somebody gets ahead of you or they copy you, you're sunk, right? So it is an expensive process, but I'm not a patent lawyer. But you want to really focus in on looking at that early on in the process, and they can help you. Again, it's length, and it takes a really long time. It takes like years for patents to issue, so you want to kind of get ahead of that too. And sometimes if you even say that, hey, our patent's pending, that gives you a little bit more cred with like investors and things like that too, because it means like, hey, you're serious about this, or I have 5 patents pending on this thing. So that's a really important thing to consider for your ideas if you think it's really really important.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. And our last question from Eleanor. What do you do when you diagnose and get confirmations, but then with your prototype you aren't successful? It's hard when people tell you they will buy your product, but then they don't. It's offered.
So if your diagnose statement is accurate, so let's say it's solving a pain that someone has, then I would say it's probably your prototype that needs to be adjusted because if a pain exists for like just say it's a big demographic of people, that pain exists, right? You know that it exists, you validated that it exists, and you know what's causing that pain. So if the prototype isn't meeting their needs, let's say everyone hates it, then it's not that the pain is the problem, it's that the solution isn't meeting the need. So that may require that you go back to dream and come up with a new solution and then go back to prototype and see if there's another way to do it. So don't necessarily give up on that because it may actually just be because maybe you just missed the mark. So that's why, when we talked earlier, it's that infinity loop, right? Sometimes you do have to go backwards because you didn't nail it right. So if you're very confident that the problem you're solving is a true problem that needs to be solved, then relook at the prototype, come up with a different idea. There's an audio quote that said, I think it was like if you go to test 5, this is a lot. If you prototype 5 different ideas in parallel, it was something like you have a 50% higher chance to launch than if you didn't. If you were just to test like one prototype. So it's always a good idea if you can to test multiple ideas at once to see which one will help meet your customer. Because again, there's so many possibilities and ways to solve problems, right? Maybe that particular way you did it didn't work, so you want to try to do it in parallel, see if you can do a lot more.